So, good morning everybody. Welcome to the Hager presentation on BS 7671, the 18th edition. The seminar should take about an hour and a quarter, depending on questions, which I'll try and answer as many as possible. So, the 17th edition, as we've had now for since 2015, the Yellow Book, is being replaced this year to the 18th edition, which is the next colour in the sequence, the Blue Book. Now you'll notice that BS 7671, the same date has changed, the same number is there, but the date has changed. So first question, why is it changed to the 18th edition and not Amendment 4 to the 17th edition? The reason is because it's now a British standard. Okay, the rules of British standards are that you can't have more than 3 amendments. Therefore, when we get to after the 3rd amendment, we do have to change the next edition. We have to change the date of the wine regulations. Hence the number can stay the same, but the date must change. The sequence is roughly a 3 and 9 year cycle. So we'll notice that approximately every 3 years the regulations are amended. And I know already that people are working on the Amendment 1 to the 18th edition. Then obviously the Amendment 2, Amendment 3, and after Amendment 3, of course, then it'll be the 19th edition. So it's roughly a 9 year cycle for edition changes. So to give you the process, how it works, okay, the regulations are the umbrella regulations at the IEC, the International Electrotechnical Commission, and at that level there is the number 60364 standard, the IEC standard. And this is all the countries in the world belong to this IEC committee, and then it's filtered down into CENELEC, which is the European governing body for standards. And at that level, we have a harmonised document. It's a HD 60364. After CENELEC, it then filters down, of course, to the UK, where we have British Standard, BS 7671, and we change the number slightly. We can make some slight changes, but we have to adopt the technical intent of the international wine regulations. So, date-wise, you can see it's published already. It was actually published and available for purchase on July the 2nd. And as usual, there is a 6-month transition period, so it is in full implementation on the 1st of January next year. So if a design has not been completed by the 31st of December 2018, then the 18th edition would be the relevant book. If the design is completed this year by the 31st of December, then the construction, the inspection testing, the whole project can be completed to the 17th edition. Now, the process again, about 18 months ago, there was a draft of public comment issued. Members of the IET and other organisations were invited to download this book, read it, and pass comment back to the JPEL panel for consideration within the 18th edition. And obviously they got many thousands of comments, and every one of those comments from relevant people had to be read and understood and decided whether to act on or not act on for those relevant comments. So the panel is made up, as you can see there, it's page 9 of the BS 7671 wine regulations. The panel is made up of various different organisations. There are manufacturers, there are installers, there are installer trade bodies, there is governing bodies, there is local authority bodies. Every single person has a relevant input into this development of their wine regulations. The book is slightly bigger. It usually works out that the book gets slightly bigger every time they make an addition, of course, as other things get added. Now up to 556 pages long. So what I'm going to do now is I've got 2 slides that just tell us kind of one-liners in a nutshell what some important changes are that affect you and your businesses and how you conduct your business and your work in the future. In the short time of this seminar, of course, we cannot cover every single change to the 18th edition. So just the important things that have gone through in one-liners, and then I'll expand on most of these topics throughout the rest of the seminar. In part one is generally the main part of the regulations, if you like. It's the scope, the regulations, what's in it, the object of the regulations, the purpose of being, and the fundamental principles of the regulations. So in the scope, there is an additional item added. It's for onshore units for inland navigational vessels. There is a new special location to count for this type of installations, therefore it has to be included in the scope of the regulations. So it's not too important an addition unless that's obviously your field of work. Part 2 is where the definitions are added. Now, obviously, there are many new definitions added in the 7671 18th edition. Some more important than others, of course. So one of the really minor changes to the definitions, small AC has now been, or DC of course, is now going to be changed to capital AC DC terminology. A minor change, but when you see through the book with the lines at the edge of the pages of the book, it tells you there's a change. Sometimes that little spot or that little line for the change could mean just say this AC DC part of it change in capital letters. Another change we may have to get used to, or we will have to get used to, of course, is the word discrimination, and this has been changed to selectivity. So discrimination we are happy with, it's a term we use in our daily life for the work we do. Discrimination when we have one protected device being fed to another protected device. We try to make sure as best we can, of course, that if there's faults downstream, that the protected device nearest the fault operates and the one upstream doesn't. That's what we term discrimination, of course. The book, the regulations now call this term selectivity. So when we read the word selectivity, we've got to try and think of the word as discrimination is what's being meant. Now, part 4, one of the biggest parts and probably one of the most important parts of the regulations, you would say, protection for safety, is where some of the major changes are. So, just in one-liners again, so there is consideration of protective bonding where insulating section of pipes are used. So we only need to bond items of extraneous conductive parts, i.e. they're connected to the ground. Lots of debate if there is insulated sections, then is it or isn't it an extraneous conductive part? And if it isn't, of course, it doesn't need protective bonding. There's more circuits now requiring a 0.4 second disconnection time. We've cleared up some matters on that. Stricter rules concerning RCD protection of socket outlets. RCD protection of domestic lighting circuits is now a requirement under the 18th edition. Probably the one with a major impact is this regulation now on arc fault detection devices, and the regulations recommending the use of arc fault detection devices. It is literally a quarter of a page of one of these 500 odd pages in the book, but it's the major talking point of the wine regulations as it is now. Requirements of surge protection has been completely reworded. There's no AQ classification, no requirement of how many thunderstorm days, etc. a year as part of our risk assessment. We'll go through about where is some requirements or where some risk assessment is still required for surge protection to be installed. And there appears to be a brand new chapter 46. Of course, there is a brand new chapter 46. The information, however, isn't new. It's information that was in Part 5 to do with isolation switching, and it's just been reorganised into chapter 46. Part 5, of course, another one of the major sections of the regulations. Expansion of circuits, expansion of securing of wiring systems in escape routes. Protection of buried cables to now include SELV, quite a surprise for me actually. It didn't include SELV cables before. Chapter 53 has been completely rewritten, and it even has its own appendix. Now, most of the appendices were used at the back of the book, 17 appendices at the back of the BS 7671. There are occasions through the 18th edition where a section has its own appendix as well, and this is one of them. So in here we'd be talking about the selection of the correct type of RCD, selectivity, remember the word discrimination there between devices, overload protection, and in making sure all devices and products comply with relevant standards. Part 6, completely revised. There are 2 chapters instead of 3. Not too many changes in the actual wording, however. It used to be chapter 61, 62, 63, which was initial verification, periodic inspection testing, and 63 the documentation. Merging into 2 means they've just got initial verification with the documentation and periodic inspection testing with that relevant documentation as well. So kind of a sensible merge into 2 chapters. But there are some other minor changes to labelling and RCD maybe test requirements. Part 7, minor changes to most, of course. A completely new section 730 to do with onshore and inland navigational vessels, hence that item in Part 1 scope, if you remember. And the appendices, again, minor changes to most, but with a completely new appendix 17 on energy efficiency. So they're the one-liners really of what's happening in the regulations.